We'd like to welcome you.
Ooh, my bad.
We'd like to welcome you to the Provo Municipal Council work session. It is 1/19, Tuesday, December 12th, 2023. We'd like to recognize Councillor Shannon Ellsworth, Councillor Rachel Whipple, Councillor Patrice McKay, Councillor George Hanley, and Councillor Dave Shipley. All of this meeting is a public meeting. Only the presenters and those invited in the council may speak or ask questions, unless otherwise invited by the chair. Please wait to speak until called on by council chair. When speaking, please be sure to use a microphone so that the record is clear and those attending virtually can hear you. Please also be sure to limit side conversations as they interfere with the audio recording. If you need to have a side conversation, please step out of the workroom meeting. It is proposed that we approve the following minutes: November 14th, 2023 work meeting and December 6th, 2023 Board of Canvassers meeting. Are there any objections or requested changes? Right, I declare them as approved by unanimous consent. All right, number one, we will do a discussion of an appropriation of $60,000 in the Covey Center fund for part-time personnel costs. And this will be presented by Kelsey Zarbach, our city budget officer.
Okay, I think you're gonna have to turn the microphone on.
Is that working? Awesome. Okay, hopefully this is a straightforward appropriation request. So this is coming from the Covey Center. Pam Clough over at the Covey Center called me in August and she said, "Hey, I think there's $60,000 missing from my fiscal year 24 budget." And I was like, "I don't think so. It looks about the same as last year." And then she reminded me that they had approved supplemental requests for part-time budget. So somehow in the process of adding budget, we took some away, and they really should have had that $60,000 the whole time. So we told her we'd come back and ask the council to appropriate that $60,000. It would be a transfer from the general fund to accommodate that. The good news is we've held off on coming to the appropriation because we've been waiting to see if anything else surfaced from the fiscal year 24 budget in terms of missing money. This is the only thing that's come up so far, and I hope I'm not chasing myself. But that is the request here. Covey Center was completely on track, and it was just an error on our end of getting that in there. Any questions?
Any questions for Kelsey? All right, thank you, Kelsey.
Thank you.
I'd like to recognize that Bill Fillmore has joined us. All right, number two, a discussion of an appropriation of $81,400 in the general fund for athletic field maintenance. And this will also be presented by Kelsey Zarbach.
Okay, this one, just right from the start, I want to clarify one thing. So I know last month you had a presentation on regional sports park infrastructure request, and that's the one that you're voting on tonight. So that request was specifically regarding the regional sports park project and building the park. This request actually has a little bit of history. It's on the operating side. And so a year ago, when we were starting the budget process, Parks and Rec had the foresight to request $81,400 of supplemental request for the regional sports park. And their thought process was, hey, if we want to have a grand opening for the park in the fall of 2024, we're going to need to lay sod in the spring of 2024. And that sod is going to need some maintenance with some seasonal employee helping with that, as well as some water and stormwater costs related to that. And so we knew about this. We thought it was completely justifiable, but we just weren't sure a year ago if the regional sports park project was going to be on time with the opening in the fall. So we decided, as we were trying to pick and choose what to include in the fiscal year 24 budget, that we would leave this out, see if the project was still tracking to be on time, which it is. And so now at this point, we're just asking for kind of a bridge for the spring to the fall grand opening to just keep the grass green at the regional sports park. This would be funded from the general fund at this point in time, but I know the intent is that the regional sports park would have revenues to help with operating costs like this. Any questions on this one?
Any questions for Kelsey?
Yeah.
So this is not money that will come back at any point because of those revenues. This was just
yeah, at this point, I know like in the future, once the park is open, these would be operating costs that would be sustained through the park revenues. But this is just a bridge to kind of get us to that grand opening. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
All right, anything else for Kelsey? Okay, thank you, Kelsey.
Thank you.
All right, number 3, a discussion on an ordinance amending Provo City Code regarding the sale of electricity at fast charging stations for electric vehicles. This is presented by Travis Ball, our Energy Director.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Council. Appreciate this opportunity to talk about fast charging stations. Well, before I start this, you guys make really tough decisions, but this is a win-win-win. I don't see any losers in this. It's a win for Provo City, it's a win for the residents, and it's a win for developers. So, of all the tough decisions, I hope this one isn't one of them. Let's see, let me do this. There we go. All right, so first I want to start out what the purpose of this rate is. So I'll talk about that. I'll talk about load factor. I need to kind of teach you a concept because it's very important to understand why we're doing this rate, and load factor is the biggest portion of that discussion. Then I'll tell you what the rate is, the time of use rate, and then there's a code change requirement that we need to do to allow this to happen. And then we finish with questions. So first, this rate will encourage the adoption of people building charging stations. Right now, it's expensive to build, and the rate doesn't really encourage that construction. So we want to make it a cost-effective way that people can build, and also we want to protect the revenues for the city, for the power department. And frankly, it's another good resource for the city. It's additional resource if we can get more charging stations built in the city. Before we start talking about that, we need to talk about load factor. This is what our curve looks like in the city for our power. And when we talk about that, there's two components of power. There's a demand portion of it, and there's an energy portion. A demand at a specific time, like on here, at the top of that curve, it says 300 over there. The demand for this day is about 300 megawatts because it's a megawatt value, it's a time. But all the energies underneath that curve, that's a value, that's an energy value. So it's how much demand you use over a megawatt, right? A kilowatt hour is how much energy you use during 1 hour. So there's two components. There's a demand component and an energy component whenever you talk about cost of power. And why is that important? Well, because if you have a poor load factor, it costs a lot more to serve you. So this is kind of the load factor formula. You really have to know, but you just have to know that it's energy divided by the demand times the hours during the day or during the month. And so a low load factor load doesn't have a lot of energy. You don't have a lot of energy underneath that curve because you have a high demand. Or a good load would be like a business. Most businesses have a pretty good load factor, 50 to 60% load factor. If you have a computer like a data farm, that would almost have 100% load factor. There wouldn't be any curve there, right? It'd be the same demand and the same energy every day. That would be 100% load factor. And so if you look at this graph, if you look at that red spike there, both of these graphs have the same demand shown. The demand is 5 kilowatts. But you can see the energy is significantly different between the blue graph and the red graph. The red graph is a 20% load factor. The blue graph is a 80% load factor. It's just how people use power. So if I go to the next slide, why is that important? It's a matter of cost. If you look at any type of cost for electricity, this is what it looks like. If you're over between 0 and 10% load factor, the cost of that power is very expensive. But as you get more energy, the cost of that energy decreases. To 100%, you're at a low cost. Okay. Any questions about how load factor works? Because now we're going to get into the meat of this discussion. Really, what we're trying to do is we're trying to help people who provide fast chargers to have a rate that they can bridge until they get to a load factor that becomes economical. Right now, we have a customer that it costs significantly more money to pay us than what they can charge somebody to charge their car. And so there's no incentive to build these things. So if you see that top rate, what I'm trying to do is make a rate that will be economical for us, it will protect us, but it also incentivizes people to build fast charging until they get to the point where their load factor decreases the cost of their energy. So the bottom right there is what we currently have. You can see there's a demand function of that rate, $14, $14.63, I believe, something like that. But the energy only costs 4 cents. But if you have a load factor less than 15%, it's not economical for a fast charger. The top rate is just an energy only rate. And you can see there on the time of use during the peak time, we're charging 35 cents and off peak 12 cents, which as I looked at the customer we have here, here's kind of the conditions I have. You guys can read through that on the rate. But basically what it says, if you want to be on the short, it has to be available to all citizens in Provo. You can't charge too much, that kind of stuff in the conditions. But this is kind of where where is the road. You can see the current rate, and you see how much that costs for the last 8 months for this customer, around $16,000. If you do the math on that, they're paying about 50 to 75 cents per kilowatt hour. And it just, they told me I can make a profit when you're charging me more than what I can charge others. So that's the current rates. If you go to the proposed rates, you can see, even though it protects us, if you do the math on that, that still brings the cost per kilowatt hour in 16 cents. And it does protect us during the peak time because we're charging about 35 cents for that time. But you can see how much it saves the customer to go to that rate. And so I believe this will incentivize more people to come in Provo, build the chargers. Once they hit a certain point, they can go back to the cheaper rate. And so if they get that cheaper rate down to about a 70% load factor, so there's always cars charging, that rate will go down to 8 cents a kilowatt hour, 9 cents a kilowatt hour. It becomes very valuable that way. But this is a bridging rate, really, to get them to the point where there's enough cars charging that makes it economical for them to build their charging stations. So, in order to do that, I think that's a great idea to get it done. But in order to do that, we need to change the code. Right now in code in 12.02.01, it doesn't allow anybody to resell power. We're the only ones that can resell. There's a reason for that. If there's a problem, somebody resells power and it becomes a problem, you become the Public Service Commission and you would have to take care of all of the arguments or whatever is going on. So we don't want you to be the Public Service Commission, so we don't allow the resale. But we've carved out this section for fast chargers, DC fast chargers for commercial customers, so that they can charge a rate that's economical for them to make a profit. And I see Gary just walked in here. So on my next slide, I'm going to have Gary come up here and tell us how the Energy Board voted on these two sections. So to make sure that we did get Gary's input from the Energy Board up here.
Thanks, Travis. We do love that you always bring a board member to comment.
Why not?
And the Energy Board, I love being here. So thank you for inviting me, Travis. It's fun for me to be here and participate a little bit. Yes, we discussed this as an Energy Board, and we see that we need more charging stations to really make EVs workable in our city. And we do feel like there will be some subsidy to it, but we also feel that the rates that were suggested protect us from undercharging too much. And so we feel, as an Energy Board, we voted unanimously to approve these rates.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions for Travis?
Yeah.
Okay, Councilor Shipley.
So is this by property? Is this by entity? I imagine you have fast charging entities that will be leasing from a property owner to put their chargers on, like a Starbucks property would have a fast charger with some other entity. How does that?
For us, we don't care who owns the property. We just care about who's paying the bill for the meter. So it's the customer that is paying the bill for the meter. So
and it is separate from the property. Yes, when they install fast chargers, it's a separate.
Yes. Okay. If they, I'm sure on lease they'd have to get approved with the property owner, but we We don't get involved in that. We're just looking at the energy, what we charge them for energy, basically.
But specific to the fast chargers, not to the property.
Specific to the fast charge, not the property.
Yeah.
The property would probably be better for them to be on the regular rate,
Sure.
because the load factor is probably better than 50%.
Counselor Handel.
Yeah, I just want to thank you, and maybe for the sake of the council, in case it's a little unclear, it wasn't for me until I bought an EV what a difference it makes to use a fast charger versus anything else. I mean, I think the market's moving so quickly that fast chargers are going to be sort of the only option. The difference is, you know, I have a level 2 charger in my home. It takes 7 to 9 hours to charge my car. It takes 20 to 40 minutes to do it at a fast charging station. So if you're a domestic user here in the city of Provo, you may not use a fast charger that often, but every so often you may be in a pinch where you didn't remember to plug it in the night before. You've got to drive up to Salt Lake. And there's, as far as I know, there's only one in the city right now.
I think for fast chargers, you're right.
And so it's not convenient for us, but for people traveling through, anyone who goes on a road trip with an EV, you're very conscientious about where the next fast charging station is on the road. And so just having a few of these off of our highway is a major incentive to get people to spend money in Provo. I mean, it's a great thing for a business to have in their lot. Starbucks is very smart to want to do that, but other businesses will start figuring this out if we can make this more affordable. So this is really wonderful.
I agree. We'll be walking at the mall. You bring people in, they shop. You bring people from outside of Provo, and they buy energy, they make money. So there's, you know, like I say, it's a win-win. So thank you, Councilman.
Any other questions for Travis? Travis.
Just a random one. So, first of all, great job thinking outside the box to figure out how to bring. Are you worried about gaming the system? So, like, residents start to put in a fast charger and like resell the electricity, or the cost is so prohibitive that it's only going to be businesses that do this?
Well, I kind of skipped over that. If you look at the conditions of the rate, it has to be a 3-phase. It's a 3-phase rate, commercial 3-phase rate, and it has to be broadly available to the public.
Okay.
So it's not a residential rate. You can get type 1, type 2. I have a charger in my garage type 1, but mine's a plug-in hybrid, so I don't need the type 2. But for those kind of loads in neighborhoods, our system can handle that. A fast charger in a residential neighborhood, we could not handle that kind of load in a neighborhood. Our wire sizes aren't big enough.
So essentially, there's contingencies and there's infrastructure, things that prohibit it from an infrastructure standpoint, anyway.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Travis. Okay, number 4, discussion on an ordinance amending the zone map of approximately 0.46 acres generally located at 963 West, 500 North from R1.6 to LDR, and authorizing a related development agreement. This is the Dixon Neighborhood, and this will be presented by Aaron Ardmore, our planning supervisor.
Okay, thank you, Council. So this is what the agenda tonight. The copy is here just off of 500 North. There's currently a single family home on the property and a very large backyard. So oftentimes us development services, we get a lot of calls and emails about these types of lots. What can I do with my property? It's underused. I don't need that big of a yard. This applicant has worked through a few ideas with us. His initial proposal was asking for a lot more. We were pushing back against that. And so he's ended up on this. And there's the zones. You can see there is more variety of zones as you go northwest. There's the LDR and PD zone up there. But his proposal is essentially this, to take the backyard and to provide 2 more dwelling units. To do that, he would need the low density residential zone. One part of this that the staff liked, the planning commission liked, is in the development agreement, he's committed to owner occupancy with these 2 back units by providing interior ADUs. That's why you see so much parking on the site. Another thing I would like to point out on this slide is the elevations. They step down as you get towards the side property lines to respect the residential character of the neighborhood. The 2 stories towering over the fence line, so they set those into 1 story as it gets close to the east and west fences. Lots of open space for the 3 families to use. They don't have to go to a park to have a yard. Like I said, owner occupancy is part of this agreement. As it went through the planning commission, there was concern on not the availability of parking, but the human tendency to not use the parking when it's shared like this. They wanted to make that known to the city council that they did have I think 4-2 kind of motion to bring that up as a concern. That when we do tandem stalls like that, they're afraid that some of that might spill over the streets because people don't park in tandem. So other than that, it's been received with positive feedback. No further issues from staff or CRC group. But that's what's in front of you.
Any questions for Aaron? Councilor Hanley.
Yeah, so about that parking thing, it seems just as likely to me that if there's a problem of too many cars on the street, that the owners are going to use the parking that's available in interior, right?
Right.
And if it's not, then they may, out of convenience, park on the street. But I don't necessarily see a problem with that if there's not already a lot of parking on the street.
And I feel the same way. I think if you look at the width of Avenue North, there's definitely room for parking there. I think spillover is kind of limited to that because once you start going on the side streets, it's more inconvenient to go around the corner and park in the walk around the corner. I think it'd be more convenient to move a car every once in a while. That's my personal take. But yeah, I agree with all that thinking.
Councilor Shipley.
So the planning was split on this
Yeah.
only because of parking. I couldn't see anything else.
Yes, that was, there was some other concern with HOA fees, making it a little higher price. But in the end, just the parking was voted on as a concern, and that's what held out it was a 3-3 vote, which it comes to you as a denial. That's what held out those 3 is the concern of parking design.
I listened to the planning commission and I have a different opinion on that.
Okay.
Lisa Jensen and Gonzalez and Knudsen spoke on a number of things. Number one, the thought that it is too dense for that area. It is predominantly a single family neighborhood, and the idea that people wouldn't stay there long term, it would not end up being family owned because the density is just a bit too much and too difficult with the parking, that people would not stay there long term. The idea that we've seen in other neighborhoods that families will buy a house and put their kid's name to get through the owner occupancy rules. So I can see this definitely becoming kind of more like Pleasant View or that, where it ends up being 6 singles living in those homes because the parents could buy it, put it in the child's name, then they have to have 2 roommates and 3 roommates downstairs. So you'd have 18 people living there. I could see that being
How many square feet are these?
an issue.
Every one of them has an internal ADU.
The back 2 would have ADUs. The applicant lives in the front home right now, so it's a single home. And I believe they're both the main floors are over 1,000 square feet, and then they have the accessory apartment. I'm not sure on the square footage of those. I can not back to for you.
Will the applicant be here? I mean, are they anticipating being here?
Yes.
The applicant, no, so does the applicant's house also have an ADU? It does, correct?
Not that we're aware of.
Okay. And he's planning on selling, I believe. So he's not even he's turning this all around.
The planning design that he has is to, like I said, to have common area yards and to sell off the back 2 units. I'm unaware of what he has to do. So.
Councilor Hanley.
Well, just to follow up on that concern about the density, I mean, I saw the staff, correct me if I'm wrong, but you were recommending that because the density is mild and it's infill, it's an appropriate level of density, did reduce it down to the 2 units rather than 3. right?
That's correct.
I mean, I'll just speak in favor of that. I think we need infill development. I think this is one of the best ways, cost efficiency for the city. You know, this is how we can get more housing at virtually no additional cost to infrastructure. We don't have to, you know, build new streets or new sewage systems for whole new neighborhoods. So in terms of cost efficiency from the city's point of view, infill wherever it's appropriate, that's kind of this kind of modest level of increase in density, to my mind, is ideal. I mean, if we can, you know, I want to hear more about the parking. I want to understand that a little better. I still don't quite see the concern, as I mentioned, but otherwise I'm very attracted to this sort of development. I think when there's a lot that has unused space that they want to use more efficiently, and you know, I know I'm saying this often, but other cities that are allowing ADUs are finding, in our county, are finding that young couples are moving in because they can afford it. They can rent out a portion of the house and move in. So this is a great way, in my mind, to get people at a lower price point into the housing market, which is what I think we should have as one of our primary goals, as priorities anyway, as a council.
Councilor Fillmore.
I happily acknowledge the positive potential that George outlines. I'm wondering, Aaron, if you agree under Catrice's scenario, if it is nonetheless possible that you could end up with 18 single people living there with 18 cars.
Possible, sure. But when they come in to get their
If they gain the
approvals,
you put title in the name of the college student.
right, we watch for that. So we make sure, at least initially, that the owner does live there, that's truly owner occupied to establish an accessory apartment. Of course, people can go in and break the law, and we don't know until someone reports it. But there's always that potential, right?
Even if they don't break the law, they find a father living in Oregon or whatever. I have some children who are going to school here, and I put title in their names. Right, then it's owner occupied. And you can have the potential, right, for 6 single people in each of these dwellings, each of whom would have a car. Is that possible?
Yes, that's possible.
And you would never know it after years.
Absolutely.
Isn't that true everywhere?
That is true everywhere.
And, you know, our code on ADU, which we'll be talking about later, says that if the ADU is occupied, the occupancy of the main dwelling unit may not include the 2 additional related or unrelated individuals. So you don't end up with 6 unrelated people in the main unit and the ADU combined.
Right, typically it takes a couple of years.
No,
Oh, really?
our code says you can't do that.
Is that new?
Existing code. No.
No, so if you're signing for ADU, you abandon that right to your 2 additional orders.
Oh, I didn't know that.
But
Yeah.
the example he did was brothers, right? So I mean that would still work.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
I remember when I campaigned in this area, knocking doors. It's so cute, and the cute old homes, and they have good sized lots. But so many of the neighbors complained to me that all the single family homes were being bought up by equity firms and businesses, and they were left empty. And what was people planning? I don't know. There's a lot of talk about that in that neighborhood, which I, was that familiar with the neighborhood, so it was new to me. But their big complaint was, we're a single family neighborhood. We kept a single, but we feel like we're going to lose our single. They felt that they felt their single family neighborhood was being threatened. The people that I talked to, and one neighbor came and spoke at the planning commission. He's like, "Why would you do this to us? This is my backyard. It's for my solace, and you're putting stuff right to my side." Like, I don't think we would do this in other neighborhoods. And why would we do it in Dixon? I don't know. I think it's a little heavy. Like, I'm all for 3 homes that are more livable and have more space and people stay longer, or even for 2 homes with 2 ADUs. But 3 homes with 3 ADUs seems heavy. It just seems heavy for the single family neighborhood. And I think there's a huge benefit to these lovely lots that families can buy and have a big yard for their kids. And there's people that desperately want that. So this is another one being taken away, which is fine. But I think this is a little heavy, in my opinion.
Yeah, there's that give and take, right?
Yeah.
And, we want, certain people want homes with big yards, and at the same time, we have housing issues.
Yeah.
It's gonna take.
Counselor Fillmore.
Aaron, how would you characterize the nature and extent of neighbors' feedback on this proposal?
Neighborhood feedback. When they saw, so he went to the neighborhood meeting on the initial concept of 3 additional homes back there. And there was concern of, students, there's too much occupancy there, too many units on the property. When he reduced that, of course, he didn't have to go back to the neighborhood meeting. At the planning commission, there were a few concerns raised, in regards, there's Dave and I could certainly, and I had concerns with density, traffic, and parking.
And a neighbor came and spoke at it.
Yeah, there's a third person that I have the name on that had shared those concerns about
He lived
privacy, privacy in his rear yard.
So is your department recommending this or are you neutral?
We're recommending approval on this. We feel it meets a majority of the general goals to increase owner-occupied homes, increase residential units in these downtown neighborhoods. But there are other concerns here with the council. But we feel that it meets enough of the general plan goals to push it forward.
Counselor Hoban.
Just to add to that, Bill, so I spoke with Dave Hardy, who lives in this area. He's a former council member. Obviously, I respect his opinion, or at least, make sure I listen, because he's got some skin in the game in the neighborhood. He had a few concerns that I'll share on his behalf. One, he said that since the planning commission, it has become knowledge that the owner isn't going to reside on the property, and so his concern was that the owner is just trying to extract as much value and cash out, essentially, and he doesn't really have skin in the game of the mess that he might be creating. Now, Dave didn't put it that way. He put it more tactful because he is more tactful, but he is the right man who cares, right? And then the other piece was that we might be overzoning this. So could we possibly make a project work that would be very low density residential as opposed to low density residential, because long term that could have implications of what can be built on the property long term. And so he thought we were probably overzoning this for this intended use for this specific project. And then I also, my personal opinion, it just seems like I want us to add more housing, and I do like infill. So I'm a fan of infill. I think it's good use. So I'd like us to get 3 houses approved, but I think the ADU is probably too much for my taste.
So if I can respond a couple things.
Yeah.
The VLDR would be another option. It would still allow 3 units because the next condition on that one would still allow that same number of units, still allow ADUs.
I was just sharing that as his concern, yeah.
And further history, before he came to us with his rezone, he did have a flag lot approved to use up that property in the back. There's going to be a completely separate single family property with access onto the north. That was ready to go. He just never took the plat to the county because he wanted to test this first. So that might be some valuable history.
Thanks.
From what Travis said, maybe ask a question. If we change this to LDR, can they do more than 3 houses on it?
Well, it is LDR, VLDR, right?
No,
So-
they want to change it from R16 to
Oh, sorry.
LDR.
I
So
misunderstood.
how many units could they do on LDR?
LDR, they could do more than what they're showing, but because he's offered a development agreement, he'd be tied to the 3.
Okay.
Long term, I think was Dave's point, is long term, it opens up. Let's say somebody came in and wiped these houses out, they could build something much more dense.
Well, they have to come back to you and then make the development agreement, but sure.
But VLDR would only, would that max out at 3?
Yeah, it's simply maxing out at the 3 units with the LDR.
So why not do that zone instead?
We respond to the request.
Aaron's doing his job.
All right, any more questions for Aaron? We just ate up all of our extra time because of me. No, it's my fault. All right, thanks, Aaron. All right, next, a discussion regarding the council handbook And this will be presented by Justin Harrison, the Council Executive Director.
Good afternoon, council. We're still a little ahead of time. Hopefully, I don't take up too much. I'll go through briefly the full red line version of the council handbook packet, but just high level, you know, through the slide. So the council handbook was last updated in a comprehensive fashion in December of 2017. In the council handbook, it notes that the ideal time would be every 2 years to update the council handbook. So as staff has been keeping track of things that just have come to pass, that happened in the last 4 years or so, we've just made notes of things that need to be updated and thought we'd bring them to you comprehensively as opposed to taking up a bunch of work getting time on with one-offs. So some of the updates that are include just grammatical edits, some consistency in naming conventions, addition, removal, and alignment of state and city code with the references that are included in the handbook, and also some additional changes to two of the appendices, the organizational charts for both the council as well as for the city. And then the council agenda policy. So we'll run through quickly just some of the big changes that you'll see in that full document. So in 2022, there were some fairly large changes made to the neighborhood program. So working in conjunction with Rachel Green, we've rewritten this section on the new neighborhood district program, just so it aligns with the changes that were made to Title II of City Code. Some of the other changes were just listing accurately all of the boards, commissions, and here. Boards and commissions that the council serves on either as city advisory boards or in the next slide, so non-city advisory boards. Some of these, like the student higher education young adult advisory board, is apparently inactive. That was one I had never heard of before. So there are a number of boards on which the council members serve as either liaisons or ex officio members, or members of those boards. So we just wanted to accurately list all of those boards.
Councilor
Utah
Handbook.
Lake Commission is no longer, isn't that correct? It's Utah Lake Authority.
I believe in the actual document, we did change it to, I
But I'm
think
not-
the slide is inaccurate.
And I'm not sure they have any sort of council liaison.
No.
They do not. So statutorily, it's the mayor. They're just, for as long as I've been here, been listed in our documents, so we can remove that. Or accurate, or just have that accurately reflect the Utah Lake Authority.
Were you part of the commission though?
Well, we should probably take it off, right? We should delete it.
That's not part of the council.
Yeah.
This was a suggestion. So as members of the council serve on either as liaisons to these bodies, so really having the opportunity to discuss what is going on with their colleagues, with fellow council members, but also to inform the public of what's going on. Something that I've done with previous elected bodies is when you serve on these regional or city related boards, have a time in public meetings to just give a quick update. This may be something, for example, Chair McKay serves on the Parks and Rec Advisory Board. This may be an opportunity just for her to let the rest of the council know what's going on, as well as all of those who are in attendance, becomes part of the public record, and just let citizens know that these boards exist and that they are accessible. Lets them know when their meetings are, because they're not the easiest things to dig around and find minutes for. So that is something that I've seen that has been fruitful in the past. Really wanted to get some feedback from the council on thoughts.
Counselor Ellsworth?
Yeah, I've seen that done in many other communities, and it just takes like the first 30 minutes of meetings, which feels like a good long time. So there might be, I don't know, an email way to do it or a really efficient way to do it. I haven't seen it done efficiently. People usually end up taking 5 minutes, and then at best it's an extra 30 minutes.
Counselor Hanley?
Well, I didn't, can you go back to slide? I didn't see Provo City Housing Authority on that list. I
Yeah.
think that's also something that has a council, I mean, the Patrice is, the Councilor McKay has been on that.
Yeah, I think we should add that.
And in answer to your question, I would say I'm on the solid waste district, and I have often felt like I should have given you guys a report by now. And more recently, in fact, I mentioned it, I think, to a couple of people that we're about to have a brand new transfer station functioning next year. And I've been getting regular updates on its progress and everything. And I realized that I haven't given any report about that. And in fact, one of the other sister cities has already had like a council tour of the facility, which they offered to us to arrange. Anyway, I'm just giving an example of the fact that I feel that would be useful. I would not want to need, I don't think I would feel the need to do that more than maybe once a year. And I think in terms of anything that's already internal to the city, I don't think there's a whole lot of reason to do that, because we're going to hear that information through other means. But maybe the solid waste district, the ULCT, the water district board, I don't know how much information is passed on. If like downtown Provo, they come and report to us anyway. So I think you could probably go through and only identify, I think Provo City Housing Authority, either the liaison, or we had the director come and speak to us last year, and that was or this year, I guess. That was phenomenal. That was super helpful. So it could be that you don't ask me, we could ask Terry Ficklin to come and talk about the district, or Bryce Wolf could talk about it. But I think in many cases that could be very helpful, but it may not be uniformly necessary across the board. I don't know.
I also don't think the council has a representative or liaison with the UNPA, which is the bottom one listed. We've got a board member for the energy board for the city, but not, I don't think, with UNPA on the council.
Or is that the mayor?
Yeah, I think that's
not council.
Michael Sanders.
Right.
Yeah, that also is the mayor serves on that. I think that the reason why, for example, the Utah Light Commission and the Utah Municipal Power Authority were on our list originally is because the title of it is non-city boards with city/council appointment. So I think the point of it was just to inform the council that someone from the city is representing the city on those particular boards. It just may not be a member of the council.
Okay.
Maybe we should distinguish that on each one then, you know, like put parentheses mayor, or parentheses council representative.
We can update that.
I think it does later. There's detail on the assignment where it shows mayor, but
There is on that current list of
appendix
assignments. The next change was to the list of annual joint meetings. So looking at the history, these were in some cases annual, in some cases less than annual. So the thought was to have an accurate depiction of what is actually happening. So a list of possible joint meetings. It also felt a little restrictive to include shall. It also read as may shall. So we thought we'd fix that. It seemed like at some point it may have been intended to be fixed to may, but shall was left. And then really, within the parentheticals there, the annual UNPA conference satisfies this requirement. Just didn't think it was necessary. I mean, it's great, but. The next update includes really some generalities on some of the duties provided by the positions within the council office. It's not meant to be comprehensive in any way, but give a broad overview and depiction of what those job titles entail. Updated within here, the biggest update includes the change of the current recruitment for the council office clerk that will oversee the agenda management system. The next update includes what really has been in effect, kind of the oral policy that's been adopted by the council. It just wasn't written anywhere, and this included how the council submits items for research by council staff. So really memorializing the council issue tracker and making sure that that's kind of the point of reference for research projects or for topics of discussion to go through. Next was an update on page 33, just regarding the council meeting schedule. So we're moving generally the first and third. So we try as hard as possible to make this, make council meetings the same month to month. However, we felt it has really been helpful to work with Bill Beverly and his staff to make sure that council meetings and planning commission meetings are on opposite weeks, not only for staff, but for applicants, just so there's not back-to-back meetings at night. It then creates kind of this difficulty of getting planning items to the council. So just leaving it at select Tuesdays of the month seemed like the easiest and most appropriate change there. The next change was just one of the naming conventions, so community development, county development services, a couple of grammatical things there, and also changing the next work meeting down there in sub 2 consideration planning commission items from the next work meeting to the appropriate work meeting. So we had also worked with development services to allow them the proper time to bring a fully fleshed item to us and not to work through possibly Wednesday night, Thursday to then get an item to the council for submission on Tuesdays, so that it'd be heard the next week. Really just allowing for it to come to the appropriate work meeting. The last and probably biggest item is in Appendix 2. So again, just really memorializing the council agenda policy. This is something that council staff has worked with departments with to kind of set out a process, but it seems like if a process isn't written down, it's not really there. So we wanted to just make sure that it was something that we could point to for departments, for the rest of the city, for us internally as we bring on the employees, but also when there's staff turnover. If there's not processes or standard operating procedures in place, it's a lot harder to train folks and try to recount an oral history as opposed to have something written down. So that's all the changes. I've noted those changes to the boards and commissions. So we'll meet the Utah Lake Commission and then add the
Housing Authority.
Housing Authority. And we'll make sure it's notated or whatever the preference is. We're happy to leave Utah Lake Commission and notate that it's the mayor who's the designee, whatever the council finds most appropriate.
Who is currently the liaison to the water district? Is that Rachel?
Rachel.
And then what about Mag?
That's the mayor, yeah. We're not allowed on there.
And ULCT, is that Shannon?
So
It's Shannon.
Shannon and the mayor?
No, I could trace.
And the mayor.
Oh, and all right, sorry, just trying to. Okay.
Oh, no, I think we do need to make that list better as far as showing mayor and council. Make it clear. Yeah.
And that will all, with the new council coming in, I assume we're gonna do the usual thing of, you know, these are all the various committees and.
Yep.
Just one thing, I think it's gotten better, maybe in the last year or so. It used to be that the council would get items like the night before or the day of. And if you need to put more robust language in there about getting it earlier, like before the packet's published, that would be, I don't know, it's up to you, but I just hated getting those like after the general packet was published or the night before or the morning of. It was just really, really miserable, and it's not part of a process that facilitates good decision making when you don't have information at the same time.
Well, we've met, Scott was nice enough to invite us to last month's directors meeting to talk about that with departments. We've really tried to emphasize having materials and items in by Tuesday at noon, so that then it gives the council office time to turn that around into an appropriate packet, check the materials, make sure everything's there, provide hopefully some policy analysis, and then get that out by Thursday, because it is, I sympathize with the council a lot. You guys have full-time jobs, families, you know, all these things going on, and you've got a weekend to read hundreds of pages to show up and be prepared. So, you know, that's kind of the general idea. If there is, if the council feels that you need more time, we can always revise that timeline, but just let us know and we can work through the changes.
There's been a huge improvement since I've been on the council. So I appreciate you nailing down these processes. And I think this change is great. And we haven't had those issues. Those issues were huge for a while, but we haven't had those issues for some time. And I'm grateful for that. I think we all are grateful for that. So thank you. It's working well. And I love it that you're going to memorialize it. Any other questions for Justin? All right. Thank you.
I'll take that as a silent motion, and you're good with the changes.
Yeah, just separate those council and mayor ones and add the Provo Housing Authority. All right, I don't think we recognize that Travis Hope is joining us. We are going to take a break right now, and we will re-adjourn at 2:30.
2:30.
Recording stopped.
Then Rachel will be back.
Can I
One.
So cash.
Yeah. Then you can.
And their checkbooks off.
You're like, Steve, $4 million checks.
Oh, just-
Recording in progress.
Why not? They have the. All right, starting, we're gonna start again with number 6. We recognize we're missing Travis Hoban right now. We have Councilor Plummer, Councilor Ellsworth, Councilor Whipple, Councilor McKay, Councilor Hanley, and Councilor Shipley. Discussion on ordinance amending the general plan to adopt the Provo Hillsides and Canyons plan. This will be presented by Hannah Falzel, our sustainability coordinator and planner.
Thank you, Council. It's exciting to finally be able to bring these complete plans to you. You started the process back in 2021. Hopefully we'll be able to wrap it up this year. Just a note as we get started, these plans were developed with a huge collaborative effort, primarily with design workshop. Our consultants in the back next to Jansen Jessica is Becky Zimmerman, a design workshop CEO and also the principal on these plans. Online, we have Allison Morgan, who was one of the principals and the plan project manager, and is available to help answer technical questions as needed. Of course, these plans were also developed in tandem with departments, especially parks and fire and public works and police. We'd like to thank them for their efforts as well. These plans were a long time coming. As with most of the citywide plans we've been meeting to lately, we found that as we're growing a lot of people with a lot of action, a lot of plans already in place for the areas that we were trying to plan for. So this hopefully brings together those efforts in one place to give them combined momentum, but also longevity beyond current staff. As we turn over, we'll have more consistent vision for the area. The project area, I'll try to gesture while saying it, like, the eastern project area boundary is just the city limits going up into the foothills, starting in the north, running along Foothills Drive, 1400 East, and then connecting it with Slate Canyon, and coming down along State Street. So everywhere that we unofficially consider to be the foothills. The plans were, this is true for both plans, developed around 3 themes that came out really naturally from the beginning with our first initial conversations about the natural environment in the area, the social recreation human element in the area, and then the built environment with our development needs. This is the rough outline of the plan. I know we've gotten feedback from many counselors, so I won't spend too much time on it explaining the plan. But the areas in blue, lines in blue are ones where I will touch on them in slides about presentation. We'll try to quickly and save time for discussion at the end. The guiding principles early on were this idea of determining where we had development for development here and how we should develop, also making sure that we are increasing and improving trail and recreational assets, and then addressing preservation and conservation needs. As you can see, also exactly those things, 3 themes from a couple of slides ago. The grand vision guiding all of the other goals and strategies says that the hillsides and canyons of Provo are a place where residents and visitors present and future can experience a connected network of trails and parks and gather in a way that celebrates the city's natural beauty. To continue safely experiencing these areas, conserving environmentally sensitive areas and mitigating potential hazards is important. Pulling together all of these combined visions into one aspirational statement. Plan process. Very briefly, we assessed our existing conditions, working with our staff. We created a vision. This was where we had a lot of input from the community. We had a focus group of residents, but also of professors, members of state government, boards of our state plans, economic development, etc. And then drafting a plan and pulling it all together. It passed planning commission with unanimous votes. We're here now. Hopefully, we'll be able to pass it this evening so that we can work so long on this plan for 10 years, we're able to adopt it before you move on. But if the council needs more time, that is of course a decision staff's prepared. Survey feedback. Very briefly, we hired Y2 to run a survey for the Hillsides and Canyons and also our Lakeshore. They're the same ones that ran the general plan surveys. This kind of built on the same methodology that you saw in the general plan. Feedback was pretty consistent. Provo Canyon was far and away the most commonly used natural amenity, and in general, more than half of respondents were satisfied or very satisfied with conditions and maintenance in the canyons, a little less so in the foothills, but still. They expressed a desire for ecological restoration, restrooms, and cleanliness. There wasn't a lot of appetite for development. Top priorities like wildlife appearance and watersheds, but if the area were to be developed, they wanted to see it go in more recreational direction, looking at additional trails and recreational facilities. Besides canyons, besides foothills, you can see they're almost exactly the same top responses, just in different orders. So very consistent needs for both areas. Existing conditions, looking into these early reports, and there's a summary in the plan, and then Appendix A is a very, very thorough report on the existing conditions. There are a lot of connection points. Of course, there could be more. We're working on more multimodal connections with these areas. There is a strong and diverse portfolio of recreational assets with city parks and trails. But again, could always be more. Land cover, the slight majority of the area is developed open space. Another majority is grassland. We get some scrubland, but there's not too much to worry about tree cover or anything like that. Wildlife influence, you can see some of the dominant species there. They don't play a huge role. There is a note here talking about the endangered Rocky Mountain bighorn sheep. It has moved to vulnerable, but our division of natural wildlife resources is still working to increase their populations, but it's still a vulnerable species that does have breeding grounds and habitats within our boundaries. We'll make sure that we're being sensitive to that as we move forward. Slopes, 50% of the project area has a slope of 30% or greater, and our code does not allow development on slopes of 30% or greater. Combined with our relatively high fire risk, you can see the vast majority is in moderate or is in a high, very high fire risk area. These slopes add to the risk of fire spreading rapidly. Also, adding to the hazards in the area are the soils. It's largely silty, gravelly, not very stable soil in the foothills, especially with those steep slopes. That's not a great combination. Put all of that together with the fault lines, and you get some very unstable earth in the event of a seismic activity. So that's again something to make sure that we're being especially sensitive toward as we develop, and we are making sure that developments meet high standards. And Public Works is working to map out parcel by parcel more of the fault line hazard rating. Development suitability, taking all of those concerns together, putting it all together, all of these red areas on the map are areas that would potentially be suitable for further development. Recommendations and guidelines. Now we're getting into the goals. We already covered division. And try to gesture and be in the right side.
You can move it.
I can't.
You can walk around, you can.
I think just pull it out.
Yeah,
Just pull it out.
yeah. I think we're going to attack. Great. All right. So about the vision, we did this goal system a little bit differently than the matrix that you're used to seeing, but we found that it just worked better if you're trying to shoehorn into the matrix. Things weren't quite flowing. Instead, things go in hierarchical order from something more broad going down to more narrow. It's fairly intuitive. We have the goals. There are generally 2 to 4-ish per theme. Those 3 themes report. Within each goal are strategies, and these read more like the goals that you're used to from the matrix. And then priority actions. These are not so much specific actions to be taken. They tend to be more info gathering, coalition building steps to take with these partners in order to start realizing these strategies. On the next couple slides, I will actually take the time to read through just the goals. Again, these high level, only the goals, not getting into the strategies, just to make sure that the council is really on the same page about the heart of the document. Natural environment goals. The goals are to prioritize preservation and restoration of natural habitats and landforms as appropriate, conserve areas in partnership with local management organizations.
Second is to initiate a comprehensive management plan for the environmentally sensitive lands that identifies key ecological features and establishes management strategies for protecting and enhancing these features. Third is to initiate an effort for hazard mitigation and or emergency preparedness that will address soils, fill, erosion, and seismic activity in hillsides and canyons. Fourth is to encourage water protection and conservation in hillsides and canyons, especially looking at sensitive aquifer recharge points and watershed areas. Within this, I should note, is a strategy to form a task force to more thoroughly explore reclaiming the gravel pits in the canyons. I know that's one of the priorities from the council when we brought our early drafts to you. As we look more into it, it is a fairly blighted area. It might not be easy to restore or rehabilitate. We did want to hold up these plans, but we think it's going to take a team of experts to really, unintended on this one, dig into the area, see what it needs, and come up with a more tailored strategy. So it's not in one of these main goals, but it is something that we made sure to address as thoroughly as we could. Social environment goals, fairly straightforward: increase opportunities for outdoor recreation, increase trail connectivity, especially looking at removing some of the social trails and connecting more of the existing trail networks, especially along Lakeshore Trail, and then educating the public about the importance of preserving the hillsides and canyons. Built environment goals encourage development of best practices to minimize the impact to the environment. This will mostly look like expanding on the critical hillside standards that you've already seen. Limit development in environmentally sensitive areas, which have been identified in this development suitability study, and consider scenic quality and hillside visibility to ensure future development fits in the natural setting. And there are some guidelines within this document to help encourage that. So, moving on from the goals and strategies, we get to some actual guidelines. These are more or less one page, think of this like a one-page printable sheet for different departments to be using as they're evaluating proposals for hillsides and canyons. There's one looking at development best practices, one for fuel reduction and fuel mitigation, recreation amenities, trails and conflict management best practices, maintenance standards, and a recommended plan list. And these were all developed very, very closely with the departments that will be using them. So they build on their existing plans. Final section of the core part of the document are these opportunity areas. These are easy-ish wins, again, developed in tandem with the departments who would be overseeing it, mostly Parks and Recreation. Looking at Provo Canyon, the Rock Canyon Park and Trailhead, which already has an excellent master plan, Bonneville Shoreline Trails, Slate Canyon Park, and then the Kite Peak Outdoor Recreation Area. I will leave this up as we talk. These are the suggested changes that we've made to the plan so far, based on feedback from Planning Commission and the council. So I would love to hear your inputs, your comments. I'm here, design workshop is here. If you see your comment up here, though, know that it has already been addressed.
Thanks, Hannah. One thing I was thinking is that on page 48, I was wondering if we should add something about signage about dogs on leashes and poop receptacle bags and pick up your poop kind of thing.
I think that might be in the guidelines for the trails etiquette and best practices. Let me take a quick look.
Okay.
So we do have some on page 64. Looking at the third point down in that call out text box, responsible dog ownership.
Great.
Also looking at enforcement and leash regulations.
Great.
Is that adequate?
That's great.
Okay, great.
Councilor Hanley.
So I think, first of all, thank you so much to you and to our consultants for just an enormous amount of work on both of these, and really excellent things in here. I'm very excited about both plans and their potential to really make a difference for the city of Provo. The biggest issue I've raised early on, and you know, I know I've talked with Hannah about this and Brian, is that the Hillsides and Canyons plan does not include our properties at South Fork Canyon. And I was really concerned about that because that had been, at least for me personally, one of my major motivations for wanting to put this together was that there were properties in the foothills and in South Fork Canyon that we have stewardship over. The properties in South Fork Canyon, of course, are not within city boundaries. And that, as I understand, Brian, you can speak to what you explained to me in a moment, but I still want to find a solution to that because a lot of what we're saying in this plan feels so relevant to everything that we own up there. We're talking about watersheds that we own that are specifically for our own water sources. And we're talking a lot about, protecting those. And yet we've got no mention of those properties up there. And I understand that you talked, I don't see Bill here, but that you might have, okay. I just want to know what options we have legally and diplomatically to try to put some more references to South Fork Canyon in this plan so that, because I've been on the council for 6 years and we've never discussed those properties. I don't even know exactly where they all are. And I just feel like we as a council, as we're thinking forward, need to be thinking about those areas. And Big Springs Park is one of that's probably the crown jewel of our parks. I don't know if Scott would agree with that, but I mean, I think most people can't believe that's a city park and then Provo's lucky enough to have it. And so it just seems to me that if there's some way we can find language that doesn't compromise the legal issues about a land planning document that, Brian, anyway, you can explain it to me, but I just can't pass something that pretends as if those properties aren't there and that doesn't even mention them and doesn't include any sort of guiding principles or anything. So I'm very keen on seeing if I can get support from my fellow counselors to make a motion to that effect at some point, either now or tonight, so that we can include that.
I am prepared to discuss strategies for how to do this in a way that will carry more weight and be more effective than putting something in this plan. But I never want to get ahead of the other councilors. And I saw councilor raise your hand. So,
I was just going to respond to George's comment by just talking about the conversation we had that I had. If you want to.
Yeah, maybe you're going to answer this, but well, I guess it's a question for George, so you don't answer it. But are you interested in like delaying the adoption of this plan? Are you interested in an amendment today or tonight? Are you interested in adopting it tonight and then coming back with an amendment? Because I guess I feel motivated to adopt it tonight, but if this is kind of a deal breaker for you, tell us
well, I think it depends on what kind of strategies we're talking about. I mean, as a writer, I have a hard time like approving something that I haven't had a chance to see with all of the revisions again. So part of me feels like I'd like more time to look over it one more time after all these suggestions have gone in, and we can say this is obviously the challenge that we're facing is we have a new council coming in January, and I totally understand and sympathize with that feeling of we've worked so hard and so long on this, can't we just approve it? So I'm a little bit ambivalent about what the outcome is in terms of tonight. But I certainly don't feel comfortable passing it tonight if it means that it compromises our ability in any way to address the question of South Fork. For me, I would not want to pass it until that gets addressed.
So if I could, I'll go back and talk about the conversation I had with George. One of the things I expressed to George was that the issue is that this plan is intended to be part of the general plan. It's intended to be added to the general plan. The general plan is a land use planning document that is passed by the council as in your capacity as the land use authority for Provo City. The legal issue in my mind is that the properties that Councilor Handley is talking about are not in Provo City, so they're not subject to your land use authority. Councilor, do you want to interject?
Would they not be considered municipal properties?
They are, but municipal properties are handled by the administration, by the executive branch. Now, and I'll get
okay,
there.
I'm not done, but
I mean, and I'm not saying you can't, I'm not trying to say you can't do anything. I'm trying to say that the general plan doesn't seem to be like the right place to do it. Because the general plan is a land use planning document. And to put something in a land use planning document that reflects, that is not land use in principle, and what this document does, it guides the land use authority, the land use planning for land inside Provo City. And to add these other properties to it, in my mind, is misleading because, first of all, the general plan is not binding anyway, right? It's only a guiding document. But second of all, then it purports to be providing guidance for properties that aren't even subject to the authority under which it was passed.
So can I just interrupt real quick though? The thing that after reading this draft that is even more confusing to me though, is that we're talking about other agencies outside of city boundaries in this document that we have to interface with in order to be good stewards of our foothills. So it already seems like this document is violating that strict.
But to be good stewards of the foothills that are inside Provo City, right? I mean, as currently drafted. So in some ways, and I think I used this analogy last time, and you probably won't like it any better now than you did last time. But in some ways, it's kind of like saying, before we pass the budget, we want to include something that advises the city about how to invest their stocks, right? Because your budgetary authority is to pass the budget, but the administration runs the administration of the assets, which would be whatever monetary assets the city owns. In this particular case, these properties are owned by the city, but they are outside of the city. Now, so to my other point, but there is a solution in the sense that you have, in the same way that with the budget analogy that we just used, in the same way that at any time you wanted to, you could pass a resolution saying it is the will of the council that the assets of the city be managed in the following way, and we encourage the administration to manage them in that way. Hint, hint, or we will be unhappy with you and might not pass your next budget. You can certainly do that with these assets as well. And you could pass a resolution stating whatever you wanted to state about the will of the council regarding these properties.
Brian, can I ask a clarifying question here? Your concern is not necessarily that we don't have land use jurisdiction in the county. Your concern is that we would be stepping into the executive branch's power.
Well, right. I mean, well, both, right? I mean, you are the land use authority for Provo City.
Yeah.
The county is the land use authority for the county. So the county's general plan should say what should be done with these.
But that's not the argument you just brought up.
Well, I'm trying to make both arguments. Okay. I may have done it poorly, but I'm saying, one, it's outside of your authority as the land use authority because they don't fall under your authority. Sure. And two, as a separation of powers issue, their ownership by the city is an ownership that's managed by the administration.
So maybe a resolution dictating our hopes and dreams is a better format.
But does that have any kind of, I mean, I think the issue for me is we're talking about long-term, intentions or long-term vision. And we can state something in a resolution, but it doesn't have any authority, right? Other than.
Well, I guess what I'm saying from a legal perspective, and I think I said this to you last time we talked about it, is from a legal perspective, I think that included in the general plan doesn't have any authority either. But I think it's misleading because it purports to have authority.
Right. So that's why I was but when we talked about this, I was like, why can't we say something quite simple? Like we recognize in this plan, we recognize these properties are under administrative jurisdiction and they are in county lands, and in accordance with that situation, we understand that these things would be adjudicated accordingly, but we recommend in our plan that given everything that's in this document, that these same principles apply to those properties. I mean, I just thought of like even just a one-page section of this that shows the map of where those properties are and says, we recommend that these things these properties be subject to the same guiding principles that are here about watershed protections and development and all the rest that it's just the absence of them that feels to me like, we're pretending that we don't have stewardship and yet everything that we say in this plan, everything in the survey, people in Provo maybe don't know those nuances, but they know that Big Springs is a city park. Anyway.
Councilor Ellsworth.
Yeah, wouldn't it have more teeth and efficacy to have a city code that delineates general management principles for city-owned assets in hillside, canyons, and mountainous areas?
Well, I'm not sure that under separation of powers principles that you can do that either, in the sense that, I mean, you already have that to some degree, because you've got a section of code that says what the administration has to do in order to dispose of city property. And that includes property that's outside of the city boundaries. So chapter 3.04 of the code regarding disposition of city property, if the administration ever wanted to sell these properties, they would have to come to you and get your authority. Now, the separation of powers question that's interesting, though, is that section of the code exists because there's a Utah Supreme Court case that says disposition of property is wholly executive. And the state legislature said, we don't really like that answer, so we're going to pass a law that says cities have to pass a law about the steps that the municipalities, that the executive branch has to follow in order to dispose of property. So the Supreme Court has already opined as a general matter that disposition of property is wholly an executive power. And the only reason you actually do have any power over it is because the state legislature went back and said you have.
But that's disposition, and you're saying we don't have any authority over management.
Well, yeah, again, I mean, the same principles apply, I believe apply. But
Councilor Fillmore.
I want to say for the record to George that I feel your pain. It seems like we're omitting something significant, doesn't it? But I understand from a legal perspective, significant separation of powers issue might be hard to bridge. And there's certainly a jurisdictional issue. It's in the county, which leads me to suggest what lawyers call a precatory statement, a statement of intent, or wishes, if you will. It's not binding. I wouldn't be opposed to having a page added to this. It says something on the lines of what you were suggesting. That we acknowledge separation of powers, we acknowledge the jurisdiction issue, unless we want to go on record as saying this is important to us as a city council. And we want our thoughts, our values to be recognized as part of this document. I think we could do something like that. Now, that leads me to another issue, however. That's the procedural elements here. I want to commend Hannah and her group and Becky and her group. I think they've done a phenomenal job. It's surprising to me that we've been at this for 3 years. I haven't quite reckoned that time period, but I think what we've ended up with is good stuff. Pleased with it. As I followed the process, it was very thoughtful and input from multiple sources. So here we are with some people wanting to get this nailed down here before Christmas. I'm not sure we can. There's 2 or 3 issues. One is the one you're raising, that we want to see the final version and vote on it. And I'm not sure we can get all that done by tonight, particularly with the added statement that you recommended. Second is, I'm thinking that we've got a new city council coming in here in just a few weeks, and they're going to have to live with this document. Maybe it makes more sense, from a practical perspective, to give them a chance to weigh in on it. We've been at it for 3 years. I don't know, a few more months is going to hurt, but to give them a chance to give it their input. The third is, and this is kind of a pragmatic thing, as I read through the recent correspondence between Hannah and others about questions being raised and their answers, I see 7 or 8 times where it says, well, we're still getting information on this, checking with the urban forester, or we're doing this or that. So it's not fully baked even today. And so maybe it makes sense to punt, if we're so inclined, to get your statement put together that could be added as an appendix to the plan, to get all the questions answered, the authorities to weigh in from their perspectives, and give the new city council a chance to say, what about this, what about that? Anyway,
Let's have Councilor Whipple's question, and then we'll go to Hannah to respond in general to her ideas on how to handle this.
If I may just note very quickly, those additional concerns we were checking with police and urban forester have been resolved. And those changes are in the plans. Sorry I didn't email you about those. There was a lot lying around this morning, but those have been resolved.
so every one of the items where in your Q&A with certain members of the council, you're saying we're checking on this, getting information, or this group still hasn't responded, like state lands people on Marina. You in fact have all that information and put it in the plan
Yes.
in the version we have today.
In the, not the version that you have today, in a list of changes that will be made to this version that were on that slide with all of the proposed changes.
We're making
So-
progress, but still have a final version.
Yes, because we're going to incorporate the changes the council makes today and publish that as our final version. It's a lot of work for our consultants to republish every time we get more information every couple of days. So we gathered all the changes, including yours, and published them as our final document. Normally we would do that between the work and council sessions, but that just didn't line up with the calendar to happen this time. I just wanted to let you know moving forward. Sorry to interject.
Brian had something to say.
Just really quickly before we go to Councilor Whipple, I didn't answer George's question, which is my recollection, Councilor Handley, when we talked about this a couple months ago, is that I actually suggested the appendix idea. That the appendix idea I think that you suggested a minute ago does work. It's a question of how it's worded so that it's not misleading, right? But I think it can work as long as it is acknowledging the issue.
Councilor Whipple.
I like Councilor Fillmore's idea. It's not quite fully baked, like we're peeking in them. It's done, it's done. So the question I have, and this is mostly for Brian, is from Utah Code 10-3B-203. The council shall by ordinance provide for the manner in which municipal property is bought, sold, traded, encumbered, and otherwise transferred. So could we do an ordinance specific to those properties? Or is that just generally setting up those ordinances for those transactions?
That's exactly the law that I was just talking about. That's the law that derived from that Supreme Court case. And in my view, it's already been, the council's already done that by passing chapter 3.04 that says exactly how. Now,
But we're talking about properties generally. I'm wondering if we could pass one specific to these properties in the canyon that George is concerned about.
that provides a specific set of criteria for
Yeah.
transferring or encumbering those. That's an interesting question. Yeah. I'd have to look into that. It really is an interesting question, right? Because again, you got this tension between executive and legislative power that the Supreme Court's already weighed in on. And so then does it comport with that it's one thing to pass a set of rules that applies to all transfers and another one that applies to specific transfers. So it's an interesting question.
Yeah, because this would end up being like a first impression using this law after the case.
Right.
Councilor Hoban.
So if we were to pass it tonight, we're passing something that perhaps we're overstepping our bounds. It doesn't have any teeth, but is there any,
Well, if you add it, I mean, it's not in right now.
sorry, if we added George's stuff.
Depending on how you add
Okay, but if we were to, I guess if we were to add what George wanted added, and I know he wants to proofread and all that, so maybe this won't work for him. But is there any legal risk? I guess that's my, could we, if there's support for it, could we just add what he's looking for?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know that there's any liability for the city.
I'm just saying, what's the downside other than maybe it looks like we're overstepping our bounds?
Well, I don't know that, even doing it the way George originally envisioned, that we can get it done by tonight.
Okay.
And have the language. I don't know if you've already got something written.
In my back pocket.
It seems to me like the two best options, in my mind, are either to postpone it and actually wordsmith an appendix that meets George's intent while acknowledging the issues, or pass it as it is without anything, and then in the future pass a resolution that says it is the will of the council that these properties be managed according to the plan that we already passed, and refer back to
The plan at that point? Can we?
Well, it wouldn't really
Can
be
we
the
also
plan.
amend the plan and say appendix C is
Yeah,
the resolution?
Yeah, you could, I mean, the one issue there is that
You're-
at that point, you're amending the general plan, and you've got to go to the planning commission and do your 10 days noticing on your public hearing, all that kind of stuff. You could certainly do that. Or you could even just ask development services, and I'm pretty sure they would do this, to publish the resolution as an attachment to the plan, right? Without even necessarily amending the plan, just so it's documented in the history of the
Yeah, I
document.
just would like it in the plan, like, or attached to it somehow, so that
If we
it's
did that,
not.
would we want to add a
artifact.
reference to that attachment in the plan, so it will be in the future incorporated by reference?
Again, it's just a matter of whether you want to amend the plan. Now, that's certainly not be fine. I mean, at that point, if you're going to amend the plan to add the reference, you might just want to amend the plan to add the appendix to the plan.
This really highlights my problem. I would prefer option one, but we get it all together. And as Hannah's indicated, she's making changes, but we haven't seen a final written version. We see Q&A going back and forth, where conceptually we're getting answers, but we haven't seen text to 20 or 30 issues that's been laid out in your email and George's. It just reminds me of a horrible situation where Nancy Pelosi got Congress to approve Obamacare without reading it. He said, well, we got to pass it today so we can read it, because it wasn't fully hatched. And so people, 90% of Congress hadn't read the bill, but they passed it. And she said, well, let's pass it that we can read it tomorrow. That's crazy. I just think, and I think we owe it to the new council that they have a chance to weigh in on it. That's my feeling.
Councilor Ellsworth.
Yeah, I don't feel comfortable just deferring all matters to January to a new council, right? These are on the agenda today. I think they should be considered today. If it was a good idea to continue all items, then the meeting would be quite short tonight. So
I like that.
But it sounds like Hannah has said that she has covered all the bases. It sounds like things are pinned down, and it sounds like she has comprehensively addressed every question she's received and documented them here on this PowerPoint. So
Conceptually, she has answers to them. We don't have a text.
Anything where we reworded more than just minor wordsmithing for grammar is here. Noted, reworded, goal to A31, ensure adequate parking for users. We added, and this was italicized in my version, I apologize. Kept it over there. Including bicycle parking was added. This italicized text on page 57 line was also added. The only other section that was more than just grammar and syntax was an expanded history section where we just added a few extra dates, shifted some more language, but that again is just introductory, doesn't carry any weight. We have a full track comment log. Most of them are add an Oxford comma here, or this margin seems a little off. You're welcome to see the full log. I'm happy to send it to you. But this is everything from that log that actually required a word change. Mostly was adding hospitals to list of partners, clarifying that as we're talking about the Lauderdale shoreline or shoreline trail break, the fire department will use fire and vegetation, which I already do. We just bring it plan. That was one of those things I was waiting on from fire or Forest Center. So the changes that have been requested by the council and planning commission are all right here. Anything that carries any sort of weight. I'll get to the South Fork issue in a bit. Yes.
Councilor Fillmore.
Yeah, just in response to Councilor Ellsworth's comment, I don't see a need to defer everything that we're on the agenda tonight. This is a big deal. This is no small zoning change. This is a big, big deal. And I just to make it clear, I empathize with the desire to get the ball into the end zone after all the times we put into this. But I just think we need to have a final document in front of us with the appendix we're talking about. I'd be willing to have a special meeting in the council before the end of the year to address just this issue. We have that authority to do it. I'm not trying to push it out necessarily, although I do have maybe a greater sense of deference to the new council than you may have, but I just want to see a final document with the appendix.
So the only thing we lack is the appendix, a proposed appendix, but we would need some kind of motion.
I would just like to add that we are adding the resolution the council passed some time ago about the islands development of Utah Lake as Appendix D in the River Lakeshore plan. We are fully prepared to add any resolution the council would like to pass about South Fork areas as Appendix D to this plan, which makes it a little easier to find. It's not buried in a stack of resolutions. Anyone looking at this document will find it in the table of contents with the packet.
Is that the suggestion that you had alluded to in an email that you and Bill had talked about?
There were a couple that have been drafted. Also, as has been noted, the land is currently under county jurisdiction. Could work with the county, collaborate with them to make some sort of joint vision happen. We could explore bringing it under more Provo's control, but even then, the exact use of the land also be the administration. So, from staff's perspective, a resolution expressing the will and intent of the council to direct administrative action typically falls under a resolution. That seems the most appropriate course of action, and we know exactly where we're putting it in this document if that's what the council wants to do.
Okay, we'd
And
like
we
to,
could direct in that resolution to have it happen.
like to recognize that the mayor has joined us and Councilor Holman.
I was just gonna say, so sensitive to both Bill and George's concerns, but I like the idea. I don't get a strong sense that there's a lot of opposition to what we have created. And so I would say, let's approve what we have created and then make the changes next year in the council that we want to see change. I just think in this particular case, there's, besides accepting Bill, there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of heartburn on the council with what is proposed right now. So I like the idea of getting it done, but it's just my 2 cents.
Okay, any other comments? Councilor Whipple.
I really appreciate your work, especially in these last few days responding to councilor comments. A month ago when we had our last meeting, Aaron implored all of us to read these immediately and get comments to them as quickly as possible. I think hoping to avoid this exact last minute flurry of changes. And I'm really sorry that we weren't on top of it enough to get that to you so that you could give us a clean final version before this meeting. That's, I think, on us. Regarding delaying anything for the next council, I really think that we have an obligation to act now with the council as it's currently constituted, because you all were elected for this term to, go through the end of the year. And none of our councilors who are leaving lost an election. None of you were voted out. There's no mandate saying that the public now disapproves of your decision-making ability or they've lost faith in you. So I don't see that you have any less authority for making a decision or that there's any good reason to defer it to the new council. And I'm really excited to work with our new people. I'm not trying to say they don't get to make any decisions whatsoever, but I don't think that should be a reason to not vote on this tonight.
Sure, okay. I just had a suggestion maybe for, I know Councilor Handley is the one that has raised this issue. I know one of the things you've expressed was, this desire not to finish without things being finished, right? Or to avoid that situation. So one suggestion I had is maybe a way to handle this would be tonight, we're going to have an implied motion to approve it as written. you could make a substitute motion to approve the plan as written while simultaneously directing staff to bring back as soon as possible the, you know, the additional resolution or the amendment or whatever it is you want to do. And that way you're not actually like leaving it, right? It's not getting passed and then you're in an open zone of is something going to happen or not. You could actually make that part of your motion so that both things are being voted on.
So I like the sound of that. I mean, I was just triple checking Hannah's email to at least my concerns that I had expressed, and they were all addressed. They were all resolved more or less to my satisfaction. But, you know, again, I sort of, you know, it's always nice to look at something clean. So that's the only lingering anxiety there. So if when it came back and we added that resolution, we work on the wording of that with the new council, if we see anything in the plan that needs a little tweaking, we can make those tweaks.
You can amend the general plan as much as you want to amend the general plan. Okay.
Then in that case, and this is what I just needed resolved in my own head for my sake, is to get a sense of, you know, how this might work. I would be comfortable approving the plan with that motion that I would like to make tonight.
Okay.
I mean, I guess so the resolution, yeah, I mean, I guess I just
maybe you and I ought to talk offline between now and tonight, and we can come up with some proposed wording for your motion so that it says what you want.
So I was going to suggest if you're comfortable going this approach, I was kind of feeding off of your concern.
Yeah.
If you're comfortable with this approach and new council wants to nibble away at the final language, then I'll support it tonight. Because I think overall it's a terrific effort. But maybe you and Brian ought to come up with some draft language. Maybe we get that taken care of tonight.
Well, I don't think you're proposing to come up with the language.
Yeah, I don't know.
Appendix tonight,
no,
right?
I'm talking more about just the language of what your motion would say about what you're expecting to have happen after.
But I really appreciate that. I'm going to say Bill, not Mr. Fillmore, because, you know, you're my friend. I appreciate that very much. That means a lot. And I appreciate, you know, everyone's mutual concern about this. And I think we can get it right. The resolution feels like a quite an important wording and document. So I don't want to rush that at all. So, but if I could get help with the wording of the motion, I think that would be helpful so that what we approve doesn't have to. I think everyone's anxiety on the sitting council is we just you know, didn't want to have to start all over with the process with the new council and worry that a lot of this progress suddenly gets you know, and that's, again, with all due respect to the new people coming in, but it's been a long haul and carry on this thing and a lot of work. And so I think I feel that urgency, but, you know, want to have the confidence that it's, in the end, it's as clean as possible. So if there's that final draft effort that we can do that's already with the understanding that this document's been approved in its essence and we're making minor adjustments to it, I think that feels pretty good.
Okay. Any more questions for him?
No, I just have nothing.
Counselor Ellsworth.
Sorry to delay this, but I just wanted to thank Hannah and everyone who participated in the process. And I'm sure it took a whole lot of email and collaboration and meetings. The quality of the maps and images are excellent, just really impressive. So thank you.
Thank you. A lot of that goes to design workshop.
All right, thanks, Hannah. All right, next is discussion on ordinance amending the general plan to adopt the Provo River and Lakeshore plan. Also by, oh no, this is by Jansen. All right. Is it Tusher?
Tosher.
Tosher. Okay, Jansen, Tosher. He's a planner.
All right, thank you, Council. Hopefully we can
Budget is pretty easy. I think Hannah, because the structure of this plan is designed hand in hand with Hillside and canyons. So I can spend a little bit less time on the design of the plan because as you see as we go through, it's very similar. Okay, so very similar to the Hillside and Canyon back in past resolution. Okay. And to accomplish goals of the general plan. Now, so the Burgers and Lakeshore plan is a little bit easier to define. The Hillside and Canyon, it basically follows the Provo River as it comes out of Provo Canyon, coming all the way down to then, as you can see on the right hand side, Provo's area of the lake. Right. Now, very similar to, again, the Hillside and Canyon, this plan was developed around the three themes, right? So we've got the natural, the social, and the built. And we'll kind of skip through them because they have the same essence as they do in the Hillside and Canyon plan. The goals are different. Now, the outline of the plan, similar to what Hannah said, so we've got 4 sections. We've got introduction, existing condition summary. We've got the recommendations and then final recommendation. And the blue areas, again, are just where we'll kind of hit the more areas of the plan. Okay. So first and foremost is the vision of the plan, what this plan aims to accomplish. And it goes into, again, those 3 fundamental elements that we wanted. So long-term water quality, improve safety in recreational areas, embracing the economic opportunities, and coordinating partnerships for implementation. And as we see in all of our recommendations and strategies, these points are interwoven into all of those. Go through. So where they come back, as Hannah explained this, we got a lot of feedback from the community, specifically from that Y2 survey. And the Provo River is the second most, it's not the first most, but it's the second most used natural resource here that we have. Now, for the most part, Provo residents like the river. There are some areas of concern. Specifically, when we talk about it, we kind of see these priorities. We've got priorities for Provo River and we have priorities for Utah Lake. So for Provo River, some of our priorities is improving access and, of course, safety. And then when it comes to the development side, there is a big desire for additional trails and connectivity into Provo River. And then you kind of have this no more additional development except for in this 30% here, some recreational stuff like that. In Provo Lake, it deals a lot more with the environment surrounding Provo Lake, so more of the ecological restoration and the watershed, as well as for additional trails, so we have to explore Provo Lake. That's all inside. Okay, now in coming up with our goals in the existing conditions section, there are a couple of key maps. There we go. So one of the hardships that Provo has, specifically around Provo River, is ownership. So if we take a look at the project area of the plan, so 42% the area is actually by the state, 35% is privately owned, and Provo owns around 22%. So we're kind of limited in what we can actually directly implement today. By the fact that we don't have a ton of ownership around the area. We can see that, and then we have that recreation side. A lot of our constituents we're talking about increased recreational opportunities. We do have 4 parks in the area, which is there are 7 specifically in the project area. Provo has 4. So connectivity. So we've got about 16.5 miles of the Provo River Trail that connects throughout Provo. Right? And then we also have information on watershed as well as on ecology. Now, one of
we want to take a second. So, again, so some of the development ideas we are constrained on the fact that is pretty along Provo River. So some of the constraints that we have wetland safety zones, we've got a stream buffer, land ownership, regulatory areas, we've got soil and vegetation issues as well. So very similar, we do have, and take a little second to make sure that these plans are, that we actually talk about the recommendations. So there's kind of four goals that we have. And so 1A, we have to encourage efforts to enhance water quality throughout the city. B, encourage restoration of habitat on the riverbanks and shoreline. C, access and implement a plan to manage invasive species. And finally, D, develop a comprehensive watershed assessment management plan. In our social environment, again, we do have four. One of the most important ones that's been talked about, so we got 2A, which is increased recreational opportunities along the river corridor and key locations along Lakeshore. Prioritize safety improvements along the river trail. C, provide interpretive wayfinding and educational signage. And lastly, educate the public about the importance of preserving the environment. And then last, we have our built environment. So first one is to encourage the future development to embrace the Provo River as a community asset and promote the corridor as a linear greenbelt. 3B states that we want to require future development around Utah Lake to prioritize lake health and water quality. 3C, develop programs and events and to educate the public about the river and Utah Lake, awareness of these resources, and finally, promote development that will generate tourism opportunities for the Provo River and Utah. Okay. Very similar to what was in Hillside and Canyons, for a lot of these goals that we've listed, we also provided guidelines and best practices. So whether it's coming for stormwater runoff, we've listed what are some what we think are industry best standards of the ways that we can actually accomplish that goal when it comes to safety and maintenance. This ideas that we know actual tangible ideas to actually implement to improve these areas. So, for example, if we take the management practice of stormwater runoff, I know this is a very important issue, specifically for Utah Lake health. We actually list, right, so reduce the nutrient pollution, and then we get into specific ones of, all right, what are the pollutions that we can use, or what are the types of things that we want to get rid of, and what are some things that we can actually do. As well as we're talking about water-wise practices. We talk about drip irrigation system, actual little pulses that we can. Okay, now last is what's broken down in the plan is implementation, and we go break it down to its different areas. There are 4 different areas that we break the river down into, and kind of highlight where we think the goals will line up best in that area. So we believe that there are recreational opportunities in a specific area or connection, like for example in River North, which is at the very top. We say this is a great area to create some additional connections to Provo River. Okay. So again, just like Hannah, and I know I went through that rather quickly. We do have that this changes that we've gone through that's come from City Council as well as some departments as well. Any questions?
Yeah, I'm wondering if you could just summarize, and I don't know, Bill or Hannah also have additional thoughts about this. I I think it was just so much reading and so, so much focus that I missed the big picture. I'm having a hard time sort of summarizing in my own head in sort of a quick bullet point fashion what the big takeaways are with regard to the corridor along the river in terms of development. I mean, I guess there's one thing that I hear so frequently from citizens is, and I know there was language in here. I'm just trying to figure out where or how it's best summed up. Is there, do you staff feel there are adequate teeth in this plan to really transform our relationship to the river? I know we have existing properties. Obviously, that's a much more complicated question. But I think when people think about this plan, they're hoping that there'll be some sort of bold plan that says we're going to have a mile stretch of the river that's a city park that runs all along both sides of the river, or we're going to have some really great amenities along the river. And I again, I'm seeing bits and pieces of that all over the plan. I'm just wondering if you can help me sort of summarize the biggest takeaways for this. And I see the slide is up here to help me with that.
Well, so there's a couple of different things that the plan actually talks about. So specifically when it comes to development, one of the things that we want to encourage, this is 3A, is that businesses in the future that develop along the Provo River, instead of being built where the frontage would be away from the river, we want them to incorporate it. It's hard, like as you insinuated, it's a little difficult given the amount of property that Provo owns. But something that Provo has been doing is acquired property, and it's mentioned in the plan. And as we have gotten it specifically around the Provo River, we've been zoning it as an open space and recreational zone. So it's one of those that there won't be any development on it. It's supposed to be open and theoretically provide connections to the river. And then the other thing that we do talk about is that connection is trying to use in this plan here, like for Provo to actually look for more, not only just trail connections and ways that individuals can get to the trail, but what are some recreational opportunities that we can do, whether it's kayaking down, down the Provo Trail going into Utah Lake or something like that. They're trying to more effectively utilize the river in the sense that it's part of the architecture of the building, that they're making sure that they've got like a green area in front of it, and that it's not just hitting the back of the building, or whether it's actually going out.
So maybe I'll ask a more specific question, especially with regard to maybe the first two or the first one in particular. But when we say encourage future development to embrace the river, amen. But we're just going to give it to them as an encouragement, or I mean, how can we assure the public that we now have a plan that has enough teeth that future development will in fact embrace the Provo River as an asset and as a feature, rather than just saying we're going to encourage people to do it? So help me remember what's in the plan that sort of has traction with regard to that.
So we have specifically listed in the plan so you have our goals and we have the strategies that are our priority actions for us. There are several strategies listed. In terms of actually making it, like codifying it, is that the part? I mean, because
well, I just want to know if the staff feels confident that this is adequate, right? This is strong enough that we're going to get different results.
I don't know, Bill, if you had to go ahead. Go ahead.
On page 53, one of the strategies is to develop this is ours.
On page 53, one of the strategies is to develop design standards for the corridors, treated like we would our downtown corridors and things like that. We have more robust standards for more publicly utilized spaces. That outside of the context of this plan is going to be a bigger lift, But I think that will address a lot of this and give it more teeth. Like you said, it will be more of a requirement. The chapter 4 with the implementation might also be worth pulling up to kind of look at how the sections have been broken out.
I think, George, probably what you're talking about is carrots and sticks, right?
Yeah.
So that, I think that's probably going to be more by way of future ordinances. And incentivize developers to do what we think they ought to do. How do we prevent that? So I think that's down the road.
All of you have seen the zone change and site plan process that the Rivers project has gone through, and it's this project with the townhouses and the office space. Without this being in place, we had the developer design that brought the river into the development. Townhome space, office space had been oriented towards it. We put trails, a new trail along it. So I think I agree with Hannah, we have things already in the plan. But even without the plan being in place, we've already started implementing those things as developers taking place on the river. This has been a priority in the minds of the planners for many years now. It's not something new, it's not something that's we're likely to forget.
But now you can tell a developer, read this before you come and meet with us so that.
Well, we can tell a developer that, but that's, to me, it's about the same as us telling the developer when you go to design your plan, you need to do this, this, and this, because you're probably going to need a zone change. We're not going to support this without doing those things. And that has even more teeth than an advisory document. Staff just taking that position has more teeth than an advisory document.
But when you're gone, what happens?
Well, I think Hannah raised a good point that we can.
Not that we're going to let you go, but I'm just saying.
We're going to have a heart attack and taking a second. I think we can look at the design corridor along the river, just like we have design corridors along major streets. And that's a really good idea. That's something staff can develop and can codify.
Okay. That's very reassuring. Thank you.
Councilor Fillmore.
Yeah, I love the concept of a river design corridor. That's terrific. I think when we started this 3 years ago, I mean, we had certain objectives in very general terms. One was to preserve and protect natural resources that have been somewhat neglected. We have this amazing asset here, and we really haven't done all that we could have done for it. The second thing was that we wanted to look for ways to improve it. Third thing was want to do it in a way where it didn't impede appropriate development, where the development could be done in a synergistic way where it adds to the economy of the city and a benefit to the citizens. And so I think you've done a really fine job finding that kind of balance. Appreciate that. I do have 3 questions for you. Okay. The first is, there's a reference here in one of the give and takes with Hannah and George, I think, about contacting the State Department. Is it State Lands? Who has jurisdiction over the marina?
State parks.
State Parks, rather. Have they been responsive to you at all? I mean, are you sensing that you've got a partner there? And focus particularly on the marina and the lake.
I've reached out to them because there was a question on the plans that we've used as existing conditions. And this originally written, I believe, like 2000, maybe it was 2001. That was a couple of weeks ago. So quick answer, no. So it's been difficult dealing with them, and maybe it's just the end of the year and they've got stuff pop up.
No, it's endemic. It's structural. I think one of the things you probably learned, Jansen, is that the whole ownership issue surrounding the lake. I mean, there are so many stakeholders, right? Not to mention the history of trying to figure out the boundaries, all that kind of stuff. You can't do hardly anything with the lake without a multi-level cooperative effort with the county and cities and the state and the feds. And I'm just hoping that somehow we're laying the foundation for that kind of a cooperative approach, because the marina is a bit of an eyesore. It could be so much better. You know, we've had initiatives in the past to persuade the state to give us a 99-year lease and some funds to do it right. Fallen on deaf ears so far. That'll happen. My second question is, when we diverted the water coming down Provo River to take care of our Blessed June sucker, we've got, what percentage of the water went to the diversion and what percentage stayed with the main channel of the Provo River? What was the break? Do you know right offhand? Because I was hiking
80 something, isn't it? Percent?
Yeah, that's what I would guess, or more.
Pretty high.
Because I was hiking that trail with my dog the other week, and I was appalled by what's happening on Provo River. It's a pond. It's hardly moving. I mean, I think you're going to have a mosquito problem there because it's largely stagnant. But it's at least 80-20, if not 90-10. If you start at the diversion point. I mean, I have a vision like we all do of how nice that diversion is going to be in that wetlands area. But what it's done to the Provo River is terrible. I mean, it really looks terrible. I'm just wondering, what are you going to do to remediate what's left of the Provo River in the diversion point to the lake? Because it's going to take a lot of money and presumably a lot more water than it's getting. I mean, what's the plan? I'm looking at the old Parks and Rec director.
They spoke to that a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
And they gave the presentation. They said they're trying to regulate a constant flow and they're struggling.
And they're aerating it.
There's
because
some
they
basic
need to aerate it in order to
And I'm
solve
talking-
that problem. The percentage was negotiated a long time ago with the agencies that
Yeah, I know.
did the Delta restoration. So I don't think there's anything we can do about that.
I missed the presentation. I'm just saying what I'm reporting is what I
Yeah.
saw. I was terribly dismayed by what it looks like. It's grim.
I was just gonna say, one of the participants in like the community advisory commission or board for this document was Melissa Stamp, who is the project manager for the June Sucker Restoration Delta project. And she works for, I can't even remember the name, it's a pretty niche federal program that does that. So she's the one that presented a few weeks ago, and she's the one that would.
And I can share with you, Bill, I know several citizens contacted me about that issue, and I contacted Melissa for a response because I didn't have any information, and she provided a pretty thorough answer that I forwarded to some of those citizens, but I can at least share that with you. But they did, and that came up in their presentation as well. I mean, it's a open question, I guess, is whether or not we're going to have to do more work in addition to whatever ecological and hydrological fixes that they're working on. Because as I understand it, the big issue is aeration. I mean, that water was moving like it was almost like a pond already. Now it's just a lower pond and it's moving even slower. But it was already very ecologically sick because it was so slow and so deep and still, and it wasn't well aerated. So I don't know, and I don't know if that's a function of, at this point that the slope and the shape of the river is just so bad that it's always going to suffer that way. I don't know.
Well, I don't know. I remember when the depth of the river was much higher. I mean, it's not just slow. It's low. It's frankly, it's kind of, lack of a better word, it's ugly.
Yeah.
It's just not pleasant.
It's a weird conjunction because you have the most beautiful section of the trail right next to what is now no longer the amenity of the so.
Sections of the trail are still quite nice. So I mean,
Keep in mind, Bill, that's also like the second version of the Provo River, right? The first one, the Delta emptied out where the airport is. And the spot that you're talking about, it's like a channelized version that was created. And now we're on our third version, which empties into the new Provo.
Well, I guess my question, call it 2B, is directed to Becky and her group, maybe. Are we anticipating anything by way of a plan with respect to remediating or restoring the old Provo River channel past the diversion? My concern is it's going to be expensive to do anything half decent. it's a mess. I mean, is there a plan, or are we just gonna have to live with that thing?
The condition came up a lot in all those meetings we went to with the Delta project, you know, noting the lesser flow, and there was a desire to go with that greater depth because of like the cruise, the
Right.
Christmas
I don't
cruises
imagine
and
you
all
could do
that.
that
And we were really careful from Provo City standpoint, because that's where the county jurisdiction goes onto the trail. And we were really careful not to get involved in that area, Bill, because frankly, we found this predictable.
The county owns which land?
Everything past what the diversion, you know, we'll be building that Provo River, that Delta Gateway Park. So that will be, that's the end of Provo's responsibility, and then it's county trail all the way to the lake.
Diversion to the lake?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Has the county been brought into any of this planning process?
Yeah, they were there throughout the whole time.
So Hannah or somebody want to speak to, what's the county saying about the future? What that poor stepchild.
Short answer is not a lot. The county has not been especially forthcoming within this planning context. I think they are more open at higher level conversations, like what Scott has alluded to. But again, that comes up to the very first point that Jensen brought up, that as we're planning for these urban areas, we don't own water, we don't own most of the land. We can set visions for what it will look like in best case scenarios. We can try to guide what development we can. But a lot of this is, these areas are really out of our control.
Is that on the mayor's agenda for the future, to deal with the county on, you know, you can work with us to improve the river, or what?
Scott knows, because we've been sitting in these meetings for years. Yeah, the county owns that piece you're talking about, Bill. I don't want to say anything bad about the county, but I just think they have no interest in upgrading or putting money towards it at this time.
Yeah, and it's, Bill, you're describing exactly what is existing there and the solution. And when you put even aeration treatments in a, you know, a natural environment, the cost of maintenance of those same systems is very difficult and largely unsuccessful. Tell me if you have seen some major success stories there, but you know, it was something that we noted that the diversion and the river and its flow, which created a healthier environment, changed so much when it went to the Delta that we just felt like the chance of having any great success in that area was really, really limited. And that's where we were very careful in Parks and Recreation at the time. And I'm sure the mayor's been part of these conversations. I don't know if the county would mind if we took over that trail out there and took over that issue and did all that, but it's a big issue.
Yeah.
With a big dollar
But, yeah,
to get it
right.
fixed.
I have to confess, I'm kind of coming late to this party here. I hiked the trail just a week ago. I was aghast. It's really unfortunate.
You can definitely tell where our Parks and Rec piece ends, and then.
Yeah. Well, I hope you put it back on the agenda with the county and talking about issues.
Well, like Scott said, they would probably give it to us in a twinkle of an eye, but with zero funding.
We'd have to get federal money, I guess, but I mean, it's going to be a blight in the area. Everyone, worse and worse.
I've been slightly related, but a little bit of a pivot. The statistics at the beginning of this, I'm just having a hard time with. So if we go back to those real quick, the percentage, yeah, the percentage. So that part, the Provo City part makes sense to me, but the state of because we're only talking about from Provo Canyon. I mean, we're not going back beyond Provo Canyon, and we're only talking about the river on this part right here. No, the project area. So we're talking about all the lake front. That's why that number's so high. I was thinking if it's just river, it can't be that high, because the state doesn't own a lot of property along the river. They own all that property along the lake. Okay. No.
Question number 3, real quick. I gather we don't have a contiguous Provo River Trail from the canyon all the way to the lake. There's a reference in some of the Q&A about private property gaps. How extensive is that, and what's our plan?
I mean, I don't think it's something that we fly, but it's not something that I guess we can say because it's private property. So the trail goes through. There is a high focus of increasing access along the trail, so to be able to get around those parts that are cut off, to be able to just have better connectivity throughout the whole trail. I mean, it would be great to have a continuous one, but
it is possible to walk a continuous route, isn't it?
No.
From high up the canyon all the way to the lake. You have some walkarounds.
And stay next to the river?
No, I say you have to have some walkarounds.
Yeah.
It's like going on to University Avenue,
Right.
right? But if we have those walkarounds that you're away from the river, do we have a continuous walkway?
Yes, it is a continuous 15 miles of paved trail. It's just not always next to the river because you don't have land next to the river, so you have to river. But the trail itself is continuous. You can walk the way.
Not about to exercise eminent domain on all those gaps, right?
Okay, Councilor Whipple.
All right, I have some questions about comments that I made that I didn't see addressed in the email to me. So
sure.
on page 59, we're talking about best practices for the stormwater release to Provo River and Utah Lake. We're talking about nutrient pollution and development. And I had notes that we need to include golf courses, not just agricultural runoff. And I'm wondering if that was taken into consideration or added into it, because I didn't see it in my notes.
So that's probably my shortcoming. I write it back to you. I was just like, all right, so those little comments where it's like, hey, can you add this word? Can you change this word? It's like adding golf courses, like it's not mine. Or in the as Hannah alluded to, we have an actual
The track.
yeah, the track.
Okay.
It's on there.
Okay.
So that's on. I apologize for that.
Okay.
But I was like, oh yeah, golf course because you actually right. So I was like,
Huge nutrient
Yeah.
source. We do a good job with them, but it's a consideration.
Yes.
Looking at Scott over here on this. The next question I had was on 68 and 69 with the plants. I think I may care more about the plants than the other counselors, but that's because I'm married to a botanist. And so the note said that for 68 that my list of invasive plants have been added, but I'm not sure how that looked because I'd actually added a list to go onto the shrub bit, but it was underneath.
Yes.
Because that's where the gap was, and I don't know if it got added in the right spot.
Yeah, so I have a background in environmental science, so it's not. There is and I saw your note about the box elder.
Yeah, we're gonna fight over that one. That's
That's-
where we are.
You and Chaz debate on that. We are the winners.
Well, I think it would be factually incorrect to label it an invasive species when it is in fact a native species. So it would be inappropriate to put it on the invasive plants list, although we could put it on the additional plants to avoid. However, both of those seem inconsistent because in the graphic, it's got box elder as one of the plants in the cross section. So that was my issue there.
She's married to a botanist, if you're wondering.
Yeah, I asked the city forester, she had that question.
Yeah,
He
well,
disagrees, but
I
this
understand.
is through document, so I can just,
So I can trump Chaz.
yeah.
Let's do it.
It's okay, it's on.
Okay.
You
Yeah,
can truck Chaz, but he carries it out, so.
I know, it's true, it's true. And I completely respect his criticism of the box elder as being kind of a weak wooded and weedy tree. But even though those are attributes that we don't really like in trees, they actually perform eco service functions that are good, even though we don't like it, it's still good for the environment. So his priorities are different than the ecological system's priorities, is what I'm saying here. Yeah, so I'll just want to see that final version to make sure that I won.
Check that box with your husband. Huh?
Well, yeah, I mean, I figure I'm married to an expert on this, that's useful to bring in his expertise. All right, thank you.
Can I ask you one question? I noticed on page 20, it mentions the Provo River provides more than just recreational opportunities as it is the primary source of drinking water. Now, our primary source is the aquifer. Are we just saying because the aquifer in the end comes from the river? Is that the point?
That's another one that we've changed.
Great.
It's not the right.
Right, okay, good. Thank you. All right, any other questions? Are we, Councilor Whipple?
On page 23, did we get that clarification for what code 602, 403, and 403?
Yes, it comes from, it's Utah.
When you found it, did you add something into the document?
Yes, I'll actually say what code. It's just a designation that supposed to so I want to say agriculture.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, we did find because and we'll put that.
Thank you. Yeah, because I saw the notes on that and I'm like, I don't know what that means. And then I looked at the document, I'm like, yeah, I didn't know what that meant. Thank you.
Okay, anything else for Jansen? All right, thank you. Councilors, Brian made me aware that we should have made a motion on the council handbook motion. And that's not coming to us again tonight, but it will come to us in a future evening meeting. So I'm just gonna make, I'd like to propose a motion that we move to.
Okay. The handbook doesn't usually come back in the evening. It's usually just approved.
Oh, it's just.
In work session. So you could either just make a motion now, just approving the changes that Justin suggested, with the tweaks that you asked for about adding.
Yes, I got it.
How's okay?
Yeah.
So you can just do that by motion right now and be done.
Let's do it. I move to adopt the proposed changes to the council handbook with the addition of the Provo Housing Authority as a non-city board with a council member appointment and noting the boards where mayor serves as the Provo City representative. Do we have a second?
A second.
So we'll have a vote. Councilor Fillmore.
I'm in favor.
Councilor Ellsworth, yes. Councilor Whipple.
I feel like I should abstain because I had to miss most of the discussion.
Okay. Councilor McKay, yes. Councilor Henley.
Yes.
Councilor Shipley.
Yes.
Right, and that passes 5-1 with one abstaining.
5-0, one excused.
Yeah.
5-0, one abstention. Other one, and one excused.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
I just don't feel like I should.
Fair enough. All right, we are continuing a resolution to place 0.366 acre parcel of ground located generally in the southwest corner of the vacated right of way of Temple Drive on the surplus property list and self-joining property owner. We're also continuing an ordinance vacating the public street known as Temple Hill Drive. A closed session has been requested and it was presented by Brian Jones.
There's a couple of items that the mayor would like to discuss. These items do have to do with character and confidence of an individual, which is what creates the reason for closing the meeting under state statutes. So it would be appropriate to make a motion to close the meeting.
Okay, do we have a motion to close the meeting?
So moved.
Call for a second. All right, seconded by Councilor Shipley. We will ask for, all right, we'll announce, okay.
Roll call vote.
Okay, let's make a vote. Councilor Ellsworth. Yes. Councilor Whipple.
Yes.
Councilor McKay. Yes.
Wait for it. She's got to consult the other.
It's coming. It's coming.
Councilor Hanley.
Yes.
Councilor Shipley. All right, so that
Then we get
passes.
Councilor Fillmore.
Councilor Fillmore.
I thought you were going to exclude me from the vote.
I am faithful.
I'll vote yes.
All right, and that passes
It's gonna be a long
6-0.
day.
Seriously, I need to pick up I need sugar or something. All right,
That's coming.
we will, if there's no objection, we will now.
There's always sugar.
There will be a full council work meeting by unanimous consent.
Perfect, and we can start, we've let our couple people know, but I'm happy to get started. So that